Hey, I'm Tom. I'm co-founder and COO of Expansive. Our guest today runs FM at serious scale. As Senior Facilities Manager at Currys, Tom Gardner oversees hundreds of sites across the UK, from retail stores to corporate offices and logistics hubs. He manages a £14 million operational budget, leads multi-million pound CAPEX projects, and has delivered measurable wins in compliance, sustainability, and cost reduction. Tom's track record speaks for itself, cutting remedial risk by 48%, saving hundreds of thousands in energy costs, and leading major fire safety and remediation programs across the estate. In this conversation, he shares what it really takes to keep operations running across such a large and diverse portfolio, from staying compliant and sustainable to driving down costs without cutting corners. For any FM balancing strategic goals with day-to-day delivery, this one's packed with practical, proven insight. Tom, welcome to the FM Fix. How are you?
Yeah, well, thanks.
Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for the invite.
So, Tom, you're responsible for hundreds of sites across the UK. What's the biggest challenge of managing FM at that kind of scale?
I think consistency of service across the sites is one thing that I find a challenge. Perception is everything in FM, and you need to be able to deliver the same level of experience for your colleagues, your customers, across all your sites. And when you're across different countries, in different parts of the UK and Ireland, it's quite difficult to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would imagine how, you're using many service providers across those different regions as well, and trying to keep on top of the consistencies across different service providers. Maybe that is a challenge for you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Our subcontractors and our third-party suppliers are different across these sites. The legislation can be different as well when you're delivering compliance activities. So it is really hard to deliver the same consistent approach for the same costs.
Sure. How does culture fit into this as well, when you're across different regions?
It's a very good question. And we tend to find that our smaller stores in Scotland, as an example, tend to take more on themselves.
Okay.
And are more involved and have a real sense of pride in their stores. I'm not saying other regions don't, but there are some in some of the regions, perhaps in the southeast, where they don't see themselves there for 10 to 15 years, whereas some of the jobs are lifers. So they will take that ownership and that pride in the appearance of their four walls.
What's one lesson you've learned about leading large multi-site FM operations that you wish you knew a little bit earlier?
Perhaps for me is you can't do everything. I think initially when I took on a larger portfolio, I have a real desire to help. Part of the nature of FM, we are enablers. And it was difficult to say no to people sometimes because I wanted to do a lot. But we have finite resource available to us. Our time is finite. And so there was times where we had to pick which projects and which problems we tackled. But that also moves further in terms of being able to delegate more. I think that's something that took me a while to learn. The true art of delegating across a larger portfolio.
And what was it like in those early days, Van? Were you just an open communication channel, or how did you manage that?
So initially, yes, there was many phone calls and many emails that perhaps weren't adding value to services we were delivering across our FM function. And it was just trying to understand the processes that could support our teams across the network, our retail teams and our operational teams, and promoting the messages a little bit better than perhaps they were initially put out. Process is something that takes time and people understanding how everything works. If it's explained to them better, I think perhaps they can follow those a bit more, and help you support a bit better in the direction of the outputs.
Yeah, because I would imagine, you really want to make a good impression when you're coming into a large estate and you're getting hit from all angles. It's that signal versus noise ratio and making sure that you're actually doing the things that really count, right?
Yeah, and understanding the key relationships that you need to please. So, everyone's problem is the biggest problem they have, but there's certain problems that would reach senior management or impact business priorities and business deliverables. As an example, NPS is very important to Currys. Anything that impacts that is a priority for everybody. So just understanding which matrices and which deliverables are the ones that we can influence to support the business.
So you've managed to deliver huge cost savings and efficiency gains at Currys. What's been the key to finding those opportunities?
A strong understanding of the performance of what you're delivering, I think, was what really helped me. And that is something we touched on earlier about understanding what was key to the business. So knowing your sites, but knowing how the business uses those sites. So we talked about some of the things like NPS. We know that when lifts are out, it really negatively affects NPS. So we had to prioritise those in certain areas. But it's not just that. It's about how we use the sites in terms of what costs us money. So knowing the performance, but really understanding what sits behind the drivers of that performance, and understanding how you can replicate the good areas, and also how you can impact and reduce the negative areas on the performance. So as an example, if you know your assets and you know which ones are the most efficient across the estate, measure it. How can you replicate that in some of the others? How much would it cost you to install those assets in another site, and how much would it save you? So just understanding at a site basis what sits behind the drivers of your overall performance.
So were you able to recognise those opportunities earlier on, or did you have to build that asset register first? How did you achieve that?
So there was a good deal of information on the asset register, but I found part of it was when you listen to the experts.
Right.
So when everyone has ideas, if you're prepared to listen to some of the people who really know those assets, so the people who maintain them, the people who are experts in that particular field. And so a really good example we had was around our energy reductions. We've made great inroads, but we've got a really strong partnership with our supply chain. And there's a couple of people within that who are really knowledgeable around the HVAC function, which is around 35% of our costs. So they had some great ideas. They just never been able to implement them fully. So by listening to them and being able to pilot some of these, it was a great way for us to trial and get some really positive benefits.
And have the senior leadership team been really on board with all of those ideas? How difficult was it to get some of those initiatives over the line?
So one thing that really changed it was around the time Russia invaded Ukraine and the energy price shot up. Suddenly everyone was interested in the cost of energy, and the ROIs became much more favourable. So that really helped us get some buy-in across the business. And another reason was Currys have committed to net zero. Our commitment is to 2040 to be net zero. And as we meet that journey, being able to represent the impacts of our buildings on the Scope 1 emissions and how we can reduce those is actually a real benefit for us to get our business cases approved. Currys have a real aspiration to be sustainable and be seen as being green. And I find that really helpful when we're making some of these business cases around particularly the energy reduction.
What is your approach to turning operational data into measurable ROI?
I think it's important to keep it simple, not overcomplicate it, and make sure it's relatable to the business. The data sets you use need to be easily measurable, preferably something you're already measuring, but something you can build upon to help sell the message that you're after. So I find that with some of the data sets that we've had, being able to make sure it's something that's easily available, something that is tried and tested as well, I find that a really good way of using those data sources.
What sort of data sources have you really tapped into?
We've spoken about it. We use energy heavily, readily available, very relatable, and has a tangible association with cost. We also use first-time fix, right first time. It's very important in our business because it's known to reduce costs. improve service. So we use that across our supply chain, and then just cost, raw cost. Everyone can relate to that, and it's something that we pride ourselves on delivering a good service, but an efficient service. So cost is definitely one of our major deliverables.
You've achieved a 48% reduction in remedial risk in compliance areas. How did you make that possible?
By building relationships, actually. So when we first looked at this problem, some of the relationships didn't exist in the level of detail they needed to be. We had our FM supplier, we had the third-party specialists performing the compliance activity, and then we had ourselves as the client. And the messages perhaps weren't clear enough from all parties about what the problem was and how we were going to address it as a team, because we needed to work better as a team. So I think by investing that time, understanding the problems, asking a lot of questions. So I was asking questions when I first joined that perhaps hadn't been asked before. A lot of questions about what the problem was, what they were doing to address the problem, how they were assessing it, what their control measures were, and how they were documenting it, how they were going to review it. And it took a bit of time, but once we invested in that change and invested time in each other to make that change, it really helps. And we managed to understand what some of the major blockers were. There was IT, like system issues talking between the three parties, resolve some of those as an example, and improving that information flow and understanding where each other were coming from was key to reducing those remedials.
And across a huge estate, putting those good processes and practices in place was enabling you, was it, to get hold of that data, understand where your risks were? How did you approach it?
Initially, we had just a huge list of problems.
Right.
It was understanding the processes that were generating these in those formats. The actual risks on the ground were manageable. We were doing that well. It was how they were documented and demonstrated and therefore audited that was the issue, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. What we find that, especially with scale, when these services take place, often there's a lot of remedial actions. There may be 3, 4, 5 things to look at. There may be a couple that have high importance, but at scale, that's a huge undertaking, isn't it? To make sure you understand where those risks are, and then you're actually taking action on those risks. How did technology help you with this issue?
Well, it did help with some of the issues we had around the compliance. It just helped because we could bring all the data source into a single source.
Yeah.
I mean, that's relatively basic items, but we helped automate and some of the paperwork and remove some of the paperwork that was previously holding it up. So things like temperature testing, or being able to prove that store managers had checked their fire exits, and simple things that previously were all done on paper and harder to demonstrate. We could automate it in one of their task managers on their iPads. They were all sent away centrally, and it was much easier to share that information with our assessors to know that activity had actually taken place. So the technology enabled the data sharing and showed it was easier for us to demonstrate the activities that we were performing.
Absolutely. But a lot of people say, FM is just a people business and it's all about great communications. And even with good technology, it doesn't necessarily mean that everyone's going to engage and you're going to get those data points that you need. So it's great to hear that you were able to implement something like that, which must have been how long did that project take? It must take you some time to get that over the line.
Yeah, I think it was probably about 6 months by the time we started looking at it in depth and in detail. And some of that was just IT firewalls, basic things like that. But if you can explain the benefits and make people understand why it's important that they help you as a business, you can get through some of those challenges. But everything takes time. But it was really, really pleasing once that took effect.
What's one compliance lesson that stuck in your head across your career?
one of the compliance lessons I think that has resonated with me is that there's no point performing the task if you can't demonstrate it. If you can't demonstrate that activity has taken place and at a time you need, and it's not auditable, it makes it almost pointless at times. Because you need to, the whole point of doing this compliance and activities, it needs to be there to demonstrate that you've done it. You have to prove that you've done it. Some of the more high-risk activities, it could end up in court if there's an injury or something like that. So you need to be able to prove that you've done everything that you should. But most importantly, you need to demonstrate to all the assessors and all their compliance activity across what you're measuring that all those tasks have been done properly, because otherwise, what are you measuring?
And again, at scale,
yeah,
that can be extremely challenging, because if you're not doing it right once, the chances are you may not be doing it right 100 times.
That's true. I think when I first joined Currys, the remedials were around 1,200 or something like that on some of the remedial risk. And where do you start on?
Yeah,
that was just on one of the packages. That was on fire package. But it was all very basic items that just needed to be worked through for how we can address them and how we can actually demonstrate it. It's all been done in a format that was sufficient for our assessors.
How did you manage expectations with budget there? Because you walk into a business, you got 1,200 remedial actions at risk. Maybe the business isn't used to spending that money and remediating that risk, but how did you manage expectations there?
It wasn't easy. I mean, we didn't have to have a huge amount of investment. Mainly it was process. So we were already, in effect, paying for the compliance activity. We just had to tweak the existing process. And some of the investments were quite minor, a system change here, a few extra hours building it and things like that. So it wasn't, for that level of change, it wasn't a huge investment, if that makes sense. Thankfully it wasn't too high, because it's not an easy one to ask money to improve, is it?
No, absolutely not. Tom, you've delivered hundreds of thousands in annual energy savings. What's worked best in reducing energy across that large estate of yours?
Being able to measure what you have. There were some data gaps. I think initially when I joined Currys, we've really invested to make sure that we are aware of our energy performance and we're really monitoring it strongly. I think listening to the experts, we touched upon it. We've got a really strong energy team and we're all working towards the same goals. We have an energy bureau up in Glasgow that monitor all our sites. They're all connected to all our sites. We got half-hourly data up there that's measured. There's AI algorithms that monitor these for predicted outputs. And we have a really strong FM engineering team that work with us with our objectives. Listening to those, we've spoken about, everyone has ideas. So we sit around, we brainstorm, we talk about some of the potential solutions, and a lot of trials. We trial a lot of things, and that's really helped, because we can then look back at what's worked well, and see what we can scale up. So that's probably the biggest wins we've had.
For those FMs out there that are not monitoring in the same detail as you are, you talked about the Energy Bureau there. What sort of opportunities are they able to find by monitoring the data, and how does AI play a part in that as well?
That's a really good question. So they are plugged into our half-hourly data. So every day there's a file at 7 p.m. that's sent to our Energy Bureau that sits on their energy platform. So they will be looking at last night's data today,
right,
for all our sites. The AI algorithm monitors what is expected. If it sits above the nighttime baseload, it will flag it immediately. If it sits above a threshold, we have it set at £50 a week. If it sits above that for the consumption, it will flag it. Now, sometimes if it's extremely cold or hot, it can flag. But this monitors the usage, the expected daily usage, based upon previous consumption.
Right.
Analyzes where it thinks we should be using, and then flags it if it's varied either high or low. We've started trialing it where it's connected to weather stations. So we're trying to really maximise the intelligence around what the expected output and energy consumption is. So on a huge electricity bill like ours, you can understand why we do that.
How do you connect sustainability initiatives to the commercial side of FM, getting buy-in from finance and leadership as well?
A brilliant question, and it is absolutely key to delivering large projects in sustainability. Thankfully for us, we have those strong core values to the business that we mentioned around achieving net zero by 2040. But I think having really good relationships with your finance team is key to being able to understand where they're coming from, but also project your side of the fence, so where the FM team's coming from. We understand their reporting cycles, we understand their finance cycles. If you have that relationship with them and you can have an honest conversation about your expectations for CAPEX or OPEX investment, and they can tell you, well, actually, this year's a bit light, but next year we should have more CAPEX available. What have you got in mind? I find that is really helped us get the investment we need. The other thing we often do too is understand what their minimum return on investments are. So anything less than 3 years, we won't get approval generally. So having that knowledge and having that relationship with them has really helped us get the buy-in from our finance teams.
And how has data affected the way that you run facilities?
I'd say it's helped us work smarter and more efficiently. So it has helped us become more targeted in our approach to problems. It makes it easier to measure things. So to implement change, we need to be able to measure what the problem is or what we want to change. And I found by having that data more readily available, it's much easier to get information these days and share information. So I found it's much easier to understand problems because of this data. A simple example being whether it's understanding the cost of something. It might have had to measure the hours initially on worksheets. It might have been a paper trail, whereas now it's all automated. You can get a report telling us how many hours that task has taken. And so if you're looking at changing, whether it's PPM schedules or trying to understand the benefit of right first time and the first time fix, it's much more easy to do that these days thanks to the amount of data we have. We touched upon energy data. That's so much more measurable and easy to get across all utilities, gas, water even, which is a real problem. You never used to get half-hourly data on water. And it can be other things as well. Understanding costs of supply chain and things like that, I think it's easier to capture that data through systems and software than it ever has been.
Something I'd be interested to understand is, because I've seen it a lot, particularly over the last few years, is that shift from data being owned by your service providers, that is your data, but it's being owned by the service providers in their own technology, to you actually owning your own data and wrestling that back almost, so you're in ownership of it. Is that something you've experienced over your time at Currys?
Yes, definitely. So the intellectual property of the data is definitely something that we have spoken about and is appearing more and more in our contracts. So at a procurement level, we're asking those questions in the contract. Who owns that data? Where does it sit? And if I think one of the things in my experience where that came about was when Carillion went under.
Yeah.
Suddenly, a lot of the information on our sites, the asset information, the PPM schedules, is all gone. That was sat with them on their Maximo system.
Yeah.
So people are trying to protect our position perhaps a bit more strongly than we had previously.
You're often caught between strategy and the delivery itself. How do you stay close to the detail without actually getting lost in it?
It's a great question, and it's difficult at times. It's very easy to get sucked down into the detail in FM, irrespective of what level you're at, I think. So one of the great ways we do it is we have my manager always asks at the front end of the week, what are the key deliverables on the big projects? And at the back end of the week, we'll have another touch point just to understand where all the big projects are. We have a big range of small CAPEX and big CAPEX projects, but also our big OPEX projects that rest within our FM team. But it doesn't have to be those. It could just be some of the bigger things you're working on. But we speak about them at the front end, speak about them at the back end, and I help that really helps me focus to try and step back and say, right, where are we? What are we actually trying to achieve, other than just improving day to day in certain sites?
It feels like a smart way of working because you're anticipating that conversation again at the end of the week. So you're going to have that chat, and you need to make some progress through the week in order to report back.
Exactly, and I find it works for me because in FM you can't be as prescriptive as today. In these 2 hours, I will work on X and Y, because there is still an element of being operational, and you're not sure what's going to come in the inbox at that moment. It could be a huge range of things. So it gives a small amount of flexibility to cover a week, which I find works for me personally.
What's your advice for FMs moving into senior multi-site leadership roles?
Probably getting close to the business and understanding how your business uses those sites. If you can find out what's important to your key stakeholders and how those sites influence those objectives, you can understand how you can help the business, and you can help those people within your business. But a big part of that is understanding the sites, building the relationships on the sites. People are always happy to tell you about the problems, but you have to listen and understand what sits behind that problem. What are the drivers of that problem, and how can you help improve the performance of that site? So I think relationships is absolutely key, but underneath that, learning your sites.
So we have a closing tradition on the FM Fix, and we call it the FM Fix Reactive Round. It's because we know FMs are great at putting out fires, but with these questions, you've got no time to think, just answer. Are you ready?
Righto, yeah.
Looking back, what's been your proudest moment in FM so far?
I think it's when I implemented a process change for recovering insurance. And the reason I'm proud of it was I was told it didn't sit with our department. It's not that important. The value isn't that high. Your time's better spent elsewhere. But I knew deep down that it was valuable. There was a process that had changed within our business over time, because there was a time where it wasn't that invaluable. It's about recovering insurance from landlords for property damage. But then we had a few changes within our business. We had a spate of burglaries. We had increasing storm damage, and we had outsourced three-party logistics. So we had more vehicular damage to our stores, and I knew there was value. It's been ongoing now for 5 years, and we have it's £608,000 recovered from landlords. And the best part of it, the legacy's there. I spent little time doing it now. It's been handed to another member of the team. So I'm really proud of it, because we don't spend much time now. There's the legacy, the process is there. It's ingrained in what we do. But also because initially, I was told, don't do it, don't go after it. But, sometimes trust your instincts.
Wow. And that's straight back on the bottom line.
Straight back on the bottom line, yeah.
One compliance headache you'd love to fix overnight?
I'd have to say it's other departments coming in and making changes that we're not aware of. So whether it's other teams, IT, security, drilling through fireboarding and impacting our fire rating of our sites. If it's operational teams moving around racking and not understanding that we inspect racking and there's insurance elements of that, or stacking it so high that it sits above our sprinkler heads, things like that. So there's a lot of elements where other teams can negatively impact the work we do in compliance arena, and I'd love for that not to happen.
Absolutely. Best piece of career advice you've ever received?
It might not apply to everyone, but the adage 20s are for learning, 30s are for earning really helped me, because when I was younger in my 20s, I was so focused on trying to learn everything I can from the experts. I had a great mentor. I think it's really important to try and learn as much as you can whilst you can. And the 20s, when I was in my 20s, was a great time to do that. Once you got the experience and you got the confidence, then that can translate into salary expectations. But I found that learning as much as you can while you can in your 20s, really good advice for me at the time.
Awesome. Well, Tom, thank you so much for coming along today. Did you enjoy it?
I loved it. Thanks very much. Thanks for the opportunity.
No problem. Thank you.